In 1914, if you stepped off the map and into the Antarctic Circle, you were entirely on your own. There were no GPS satellites to track you, no radios to call for help, and no modern synthetic gear to keep your core temperature up. Yet an explorer named Sir Ernest Shackleton looked at this desolate, -50-degree wasteland and decided he was going to walk across it, from top to bottom. To reach the continent's edge, Shackleton's ship, the Endurance, had to navigate the Weddell Sea. Because this specific body of water is surrounded by land on 3 sides, sea ice cannot drift away. It simply piles up, compressing into a dense, permanent frozen layer. By January 1915, that ice closed its grip. The Endurance was locked completely in place, frozen solid into a massive, jagged flow, 60 miles short of their landing spot. In an instant, an expedition planned to chart the bottom of the world became a hostage situation. Nature was completely in control. The crew of the Endurance spent months trapped, waiting for the winter to pass. In Antarctica, winter means 24 straight hours of absolute darkness. And all through the dark, they could hear the ice grinding, steadily increasing the physical pressure against the wooden hull. By October, the pressure reached its breaking point. The ice ruptured the ship's frame, pouring freezing water into the hull and forcing the crew out onto the frozen ocean. Now 27 men stood on a drifting piece of sea ice. They had no shelter, no ship, and they were completely severed from the rest of humanity. Without a radio, nobody in the outside world even knew they were in danger. Freezing to death was a very real possibility, but the creeping threat of madness and total despair was moving much faster. To survive, Shackleton realized his men would have to stop seeing themselves as explorers on a mission and start seeing themselves as castaways with one job: making it to the next morning. If they were going to drag their supplies across the ice, every single ounce mattered. Shackleton issued a brutal mandate. Each man was limited to exactly 2 pounds of personal gear. To prove he was serious, the captain reached into his own pockets. He dropped a handful of gold coins and his personal Bible straight into the snow. Wealth had zero value here. He made exactly one strategic exception. He allowed the expedition's photographer to save 150 photo negatives. If they lived, Shackleton knew they would need proof this nightmare actually happened. They loaded their remaining rations into the lifeboats and started pulling. The summer sun had softened the ice, making the surface jagged and slushy. It took the entire exhausted crew 3 full hours of straining against the ropes to move a single 1-ton boat just 1 mile. Shackleton knew exhaustion breeds depression, so he assigned specific menial chores to every single man to keep their minds occupied. When rations began to run dangerously low, he intentionally lied about how much food they had left. He recognized a vital rule of extreme survival. Managing his crew's belief in survival was far more critical than managing their daily caloric intake. When their ice camp finally shattered beneath them, the crew scrambled into the lifeboats. They fought through the freezing surf and landed on the desolate rocks of Elephant Island. It was solid ground, but nobody was coming to look for them there. Shackleton decided to leave 22 men behind and take a small crew of 5 in a 20-foot open lifeboat. Their target was a whaling station on South Georgia Island, 1,300 kilometers away. That route forced them through the Drake Passage. This specific stretch is known as the deadliest ocean crossing on Earth, producing massive 40-foot waves that have claimed tens of thousands of sailors. They survived the passage, only to be blown to the wrong side of South Georgia Island. To reach the whaling station, Shackleton and 2 of his men had to march 29 miles over a 10,000-foot glacier-covered mountain range, a route no human had ever crossed on foot. They didn't have climbing gear or tents, but they marched anyway. True resilience often means abandoning a safe, slow death for a terrifying, high-risk bid for life. Back on Elephant Island, 22 men were waiting under the command of Frank Wild, and they were slowly starving. Their bodies were breaking down. They survived on a dwindling diet of seal and penguin meat, fighting off severe frostbite. One crew member developed gangrene so severe they had to amputate his toes right there on the beach. To fight the creeping despair, Frank Wild instituted a rigid daily routine. Every single morning, he ordered his 6 starving men to pack up their sleeping bags and get ready. He told them, "The boss may come today."
He did that every day for 4 months, and then one afternoon, a ship appeared on the horizon. Shackleton had returned. By maintaining strict discipline and forcing a daily ritual of hope, Wild kept his team from turning on each other long after their physical bodies had begun to fail. It had been 522 days since they were trapped in the Weddell Sea. They endured crushed ships, freezing oceans, and starvation. Yet every single one of the 27 men who stood on that ice floe made it home alive. Shackleton demonstrated that while the Antarctic could crush a ship's hull, his leadership prevented it from crushing the collective will of his men. In 2022, underwater explorers located the wreckage of the Endurance. Resting 10,000 feet deep, the freezing waters preserved the ship perfectly. It sits quietly in the dark, a monument to a moment in history when technical failure was met with human grit. Even in the world's most hostile environment, the crew's discipline proved more